Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Common Sense with Dr. Ben Carson. I'm your host, Ben Carson, and I'm honored today to be joined by two extraordinary guests whose work invites us to reflect on America's past, not as a string of coincidences, but as a powerful narrative guided by purpose and providence. First, Michael Medved, a nationally syndicated radio host, respected historian, and best-selling author of The American Miracle, Divine Providence and the Rise of the Republic. He's also long challenged us to see history not as random, but as meaningful. And also we have Tim Mahoney, acclaimed filmmaker and director of the new movie, The American Miracle. He's known for his Patterns of Evidence film series, which are magnificent. And Tim brings meticulous research and compelling storytelling to life on the screen. Together, they brought to the big screen a bold and timely question. Is America's survival and success the result of chance or something greater? And I'm excited to explore this today with our two amazing guests. Just on a personal note, I noted in my book, Gifted Hands, that the reason I attended Yale University, I only had enough money to apply to one college. I said, I'm going to apply to the college that wins the grand championship of College Bowl this year, because it was my favorite show. And it turned out it was between Harvard and Yale. And Yale destroyed Harvard, so I didn't want to go to school with a bunch of dummies. And our guest, Michael Medved, was the captain of that Yale team. So he had a lot to do with me going to Yale and finding my wife there, who we will be married for 50 years in July. So that was the best thing about going to Yale. But Michael, you played a big role there. So thank you.
I'm very proud of it and proud of everything that you've given to our country.
All right. Well, let me just start with you, Michael. What inspired you to write The American Miracle? How did the ideal evolve into a movie?
Well, first of all, what inspired me at the first time to write the book was the fact that on my radio show, I do history shows periodically, like tape in advance. And the most popular of my history shows was a show called God's Hand on America, which basically took a look at all of those amazing coincidences that allowed America to become what it has been, which is the greatest country, the greatest state that has ever existed. And a lot of people look at this and say, there's a lot of happy accidents. That's what it is. It's a lot of coincidences. But a pattern of happy accidents is still a pattern. And because of the response to the original radio broadcast that I did, I met with my publisher and we decided to do a book taking a look at some of those incidents. And then because of the interest in that, I actually was approached by someone. We had done a previous film called Hollywood versus Religion, which was about the way that often the entertainment industry has distorted the life of people of faith or ignored it. And he wanted to do another film to partially connected with the 250th anniversary of our blessed country. And so I'd worked with Tim before. I had made some contributions to his Patterns of Evidence movies, which, as you say, are absolutely wonderful. And Tim jumped at the chance. And it's one of the, like my marriage, which we just had our 40th anniversary. It's one of those relationships that has just seemed to be made for each other. Tim has done a magnificent job bringing this all together and getting this movie ready for its big premiere, which is coming up in June.
Fantastic. Well, Tim, what what drew you into it, and does it align with your previous work?
It really does. I've been investigating evidence for God in history, and this film, I had to think about it for a little while. And I go, well, I've been in the BC time period for a long time, searching the story of Exodus, and did Moses write the first books of the Bible, and where did the alphabet come from? Where is Red Sea miracle? Where did that happen? And then when Michael came and brought this up, well, what he didn't know is that when I was in high school, I loved American history. It was what brought me to reading and really getting involved with the love of history. And so I actually prayed and said, well, can I do both? And I realized that I could continue to do biblical archaeology investigations, searching for a pattern of evidence. And what's interesting is that Michael has also searched for a pattern of evidence of God acting in history. And that's what this is really about. And so it was such a wonderful opportunity and an honor when you think about having the privilege of working on this material. And so we wanted to make sure that it was 100% accurate. And we hired a film historian. And what I mean by accurate is not that what Michael's written, but costumes, authenticity. We actually hired the very descendants of the same native tribe that attacked the British, at the Battle of Monongahela, in the same costume. So everything was, I just felt like we needed to make this very, very special, Ben. And that's what we were trying to do. And it was such a pleasure to have the privilege to work on this.
Well, let me ask you, Michael, can you share an example from the film that you think clearly illustrates divine providence?
Well, the beginning of the film, which is also the beginning of my book, is a 4th of July. But which 4th of July? Not 1776, though that one was obviously enormously important, but another 4th of July that sent a message, which was the 50th anniversary, the Grand Jubilee, and they used Jubilee in the biblical sense of 50 years, and then you celebrate. In fact, on the Liberty Bell, they have inscribed from the book of Leviticus, proclaim liberty throughout the land and all the inhabitants thereof, which is something you do on the Jubilee. And that 4th of July, 1826, 50th anniversary of the country, everyone was so touched by the fact that the two leaders who were responsible for the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote it, was 83, which is freakishly old for that era.
Yeah.
And John Adams was 90. And they were both alive, and they were both sharp, and they both contributed statements to celebrate this 4th of July. And they both passed away into eternity on the same day.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, the odds, as we calculate in the film, are about 7 million to 1 to have two presidents, a second president and a third president. The other thing about it, and that's part of the whole message of the American Miracle movie, is that John Adams and Thomas Jefferson were political opponents. They ran against each other for president twice. The first time Adams won, the second time Jefferson won a contested election. But then they reconciled and they became dear friends because of their love for this country that they had started. And that's also one of the messages that we hope to convey here. And I will say, partially I was inspired in doing this film. I found a quote from Otto von Bismarck, who was the, quote, Iron Chancellor of Germany, who built modern Germany in the 1870s. In any event, he once said, "It is very obvious that the good Lord offers special protection to drunkards, imbeciles, lost dogs, and the United States of America."
That was a good one. Well, Tim, what were some of the challenges in bringing these historical events to life on screen, and how did you overcome those?
Well, one of the big challenges was the scope of it. We had to get into certain locations that are historical. We wanted to have that accuracy. And for example, Mount Vernon, we were actually able to film on the premise of Mount Vernon and actually film George Washington, our actor Daniel Shippey, at George Washington's desk. And so we didn't know if we were going to have that opportunity until literally towards the end of the filming. We were waiting and waiting and waiting to hear. And then once that came, we just shifted all of our focus to Mount Vernon. That's one example. And then Faneuil Hall is another location where Daniel Webster gives this eulogy about the death of Adams and Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And we were able to film in Faneuil Hall, in the actual location where this speech was given. So those types of challenges, getting enough people in the right costumes, finding enough actors, we were able to get a very famous past actor and singer, Pat Boone. Yes. He plays our Thomas Jefferson the older, and Kevin Sorbo plays Thomas Jefferson the younger.
You know, Pat Boone told me that he's actually related to Daniel Boone.
That's correct. Yeah. Yep, and he'll be coming to the premiere that we're going to be having at the Kennedy Center, which we're very excited about on June 4th. And so there's a lot of exciting things happening.
Yeah, my wife and I are looking forward to being there that day. That'll be great. Now, Michael, how do you hope that this film will impact viewers' understanding of American history?
I think it will confirm what a lot of viewers believe. I mean, I wake up every morning, and of course, first thing, I'm grateful for my wife and my family. But right after that, I'm grateful for the fact that my grandparents made the decision to come to this country. And what a blessing it is. And again, it doesn't matter how you got here, but to be here in the United States, to enjoy the blessings that we have. My grandparents on my father's side came from Ukraine. And I think about the suffering that they had in Ukraine before they came to the United States. And my grandmother was stuck in the country because my grandfather, who was a barrel maker, had come to America in 1905 originally. And he was earning enough money to bring his 6 kids to the United States and his wife. And then World War I interfered, and the Russian Revolution, which followed, and then the Russian Civil War. And my grandmother had 6 children, 5 of them died. And then she came to the United States, and she had my father when she was 50. So wow. That was a sense of an American miracle. My father always considered himself, he was also born on the sesquicentennial year. He was born in 1926.
Wow.
So there was a sense of the American miracle not only being national, but personal and familial.
How did you ensure that the film remained both historically accurate and engaging for modern audiences?
Well, we put a lot of drama. First, the engaging. We really we had a decision to make because this film had a lot of information that people didn't know about. So we were telling a story. We call it the forgotten story of America, the providential part of it. So the make it entertaining was to really make it a lot of it to be dramatic, but it's so so different than what you might have heard. The fact that these founders actually had a faith and a belief, and there was prayer involved in their lives. We've been told that they were deists and they didn't think that God was involved in the world. That's not what this film portrays. This film shows that even Benjamin Franklin called for prayer. And so we wanted to then take all these dramatic scenes that are beautifully shot on many of the locations, and then we brought in historians like Robert George from Princeton, and Joseph Alice and others, great historians that would say, yeah, this is true. This actually happened this way. And Michael, you can add to that because you needed to have the historians to say, this is real. This really happened, because it's not what we've heard.
I've told Tim this story recently. Um, we've been showing the film, and audiences react very emotionally. There are very often people who are in tears at the end of the film because it's about our country and this country that we love so dearly. And after one of these screenings, someone came up to me and said, "You know, I really appreciate the writing of this movie." I said, "Well, thank you." He said, "Because the speeches that you had, that speech that you gave to Benjamin Franklin, it's so terrific." And one of the things that Franklin says, and he says it on screen, is that if a sparrow can fall to earth without his notice, is it probable that a great empire could rise without his aid? And I said, I'd love to take writing credit for that. That's Benjamin Franklin. And his words at the Constitutional Convention were actually transcribed by James Madison, who became later the fourth president of the United States. So this really does, it seems to me, we want to do right by the founders who may not have agreed on a lot of things because they had political wars and they had battles. And however, they agreed that America was no accident.
Absolutely. They were really actually amazing people. They were academicians. They studied every governmental system that had ever existed, and they were eclectics. They extracted the good stuff and left out the bad stuff. And so many people have tried to demonize our founders because some of them were slave owners. But anybody who knows anything about history knows that there's no society that has had to deal with slavery. And the only thing that makes us unique is that we had so many people who adamantly opposed it, that we fought a bloody civil war and lost a large portion of our population to get rid of it. And maybe we should talk about that sometime. I love the way it was handled in the film, very nicely with that particular case. And, when you look at the history of America, it's just so incredibly inspiring. And no matter where you came from, where your ancestors came from, be it England or China or Africa, you're better off here than you would be there. And we should all be very pleased and do everything we can to preserve it. But, Michael, how would you describe George Washington's faith? What's your strongest evidence that George Washington was a religious man?
The first inaugural address ever delivered by an American president. They had just had the Constitutional Convention. The Constitution had been ratified. George Washington had been elected unanimously, and he was the only one ever in America American president who was elected unanimously. James Monroe came close, but Washington was unanimous choice. And in his inaugural address, he invoked what he called the invisible hand and said you could not understand America, you could not appreciate this new venture that he was helping to launch without recognizing the invisible hand that had shaped the events of the Revolution and of independence and of the Constitutional Convention. At one point, I had thought to call the book project and the movie project The Invisible Hand. But then that sounds like a horror movie.
Right.
And this is anything but a horror movie. This is a movie of inspiration. But this was Washington's belief, and it drew him together with Jefferson, who was a deist mostly, and with Benjamin Franklin. They may have questioned items of biblical faith. What they did not question was divine providence and its role in shaping their lives and shaping this amazing country.
Absolutely. Well, Tim, I have to ask you, was there a defining moment in your life when you felt called to pursue filmmaking as a way to strengthen faith, not just your own, but the faith of others?
I think that when I was 18 years old, I think it was the beginning, I went to see a movie produced by the Billy Graham Association. and it was called The Hiding Place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the story of Corrie ten Boom and her family.
Right.
And I had not been to a movie, Ben, since I had never gone to a movie. We was raised in a Christian conservative home, a single parent mom. And I went to my mom and I said, would it be all right if I went to see this movie? I was 18. And I went to the local theater, and I saw that movie in cinema for the first time. I think it was the combination of the story and of the theater and the cinema. And I went 3 times in that week. And from that point on, I went to a 2-year college, and then praying about what should I do. I was going to go into radio, and then I felt as if God was calling me to go to cinema, and there was a cinema school locally. And I remember being in that theater at one time, and I felt at the end of a movie that God said, someday you're going to have a movie in a theater. And years later on the Patterns of Evidence films, I was in that very same theater with 230 people packed. And I remember God told me that, 30 years earlier, and the tears came down my cheeks. And so there's providence in our own lives. I think your
Yes.
audience needs to know that we all have God's presence, providence and presence. It's the presence of God speaking to us and guiding us along. And so I'm very thankful to Michael that he trusted me with this project. And I think this film is an important message for us today because there's a warning in it.
Yes.
That we do not want to forget God.
Absolutely. And, I remember growing up and hearing people say, don't go to the theater. It's evil. It's a habitat of Satan and demons. And if you go in there, your guardian angel won't go with you. Well, later on, I said to myself, why do you have a guardian angel if they only go with you to safe places?
Yeah.
But
Ben,
Michael,
would it be okay if we told people how to get tickets to this?
yes, please.
Okay, if they go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com, AmericanMiracleMovie.com, they can hit a link and they can see a trailer, or they can buy their tickets. And please buy tickets now. Buy them earlier because we're currently only up for 3 days, June 9, 10, and 11. And we need to sell out those theaters to continue to tell the story so that it can expand to for a longer period of time, so more people can hear this wonderful but forgotten story of God's providential hand on America.
And
we are opening in 1,000 theaters across the country.
I can tell people, having seen it, it is incredibly touching and very inspirational. So definitely be worth your while. Can be life-changing. Take your children to see it also. But Michael, why is there such a strong push to write faith out of our history?
Well, I think that people actually would prefer not to think that they have a responsibility that comes from all of America's blessings. This goes back to Abraham Lincoln when he had already been elected president. He was making his journey to Washington, D.C. He spoke to the New Jersey legislature, and he described America for the first time as this almost chosen people. And I think that when people look at the way that America has been favored in history, in Casey at the Bat, remember the great baseball poem, they talk about America as this favored land. And Andrew Jackson used that phrase. All of it. People have recognized this is not a normal country. This is something extraordinary here, something that has never happened before in the history of humanity. And I think that people, when they confront that, we are chosen not for special privileges, but for special responsibilities. And it's something that Dr. King was incredibly insistent upon, is that basically you had to live up to the blank check that had been written and yet unfulfilled that promised that yes, all people are created equal and endowed by their creator, not by their government, but by their creator, with certain inalienable rights. And with those rights come responsibilities. And what's fascinating is Richard Dreyfuss, the Oscar-winning actor, is one of the commentators that we have in this movie. And he talks very movingly about how much he feels that we all owe to America and how much it deserves our love and respect and honor to the gift that God has given us with this country.
Amen. Well, it's obviously a very special place, even though a lot of people try to demonize it and say it's unfair, it's systemically racist, all this and that and the other. If it were all that bad, why are all these people trying to get in here?
Well, we tell a story that most people don't know, and I really didn't know before this project, which is the story of Elizabeth Freeman, who was known as Mom Bet, who in 1780, in the middle of the Revolutionary War, the state of Massachusetts adopted its state constitution, and it used that phrase, all men are created equal and endowed by their creator. And she, as an enslaved woman, asked the question, if we're all created equal and we're endowed by the creator, and she asked a local judge that she had met, does that include me? And she sued for her freedom and won in 1780, which is a remarkable story, which is told with this wonderful young actress, Nicole Mullen, who also sings the song Freedom as the end credits of the American Miracle.
No, that was very, very touching. In today's society, how can understanding the role of faith in our nation's history influence our future?
Well, I think it mostly influences our future because we have a choice. We have a choice between grievance or gratitude. And just as gratitude rather than grievance is going to bring you more personal happiness and satisfaction, choosing gratitude, which is appropriate here, rather than grievance, and that makes a big difference for the country and its direction. We have too much negativity in this country on all sides. It's bipartisan, it's multi-partisan. And the truth is, you wake up and you think of all the people who've lived, billions of people over the course of humanity. We have the golden ticket. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be born in this country, to be naturalized citizens, as my grandparents, all four of them were, I think it can make a happier country and happier families and happier individuals to remember that part of the whole idea of prayer is not asking for things, but it's saying thank you for what we've received.
My thinking on it too, it was such a wonderful learning experience making this film. And Dr. Stephen Meyer, who contributed as well from the Discovery Institute, of which Michael is a fellow, he brought something very key in that the founders, and Robert George talks about this, they understood the book of Genesis. And they understood that that people were made in the image of God. So they had dignity, that each person had dignity, and that our rights really don't come from a king, but they come from God. If you look at the big picture, but yet we are a fallen people. So we have some depravity. So they balance between dignity and depravity, these two ideas, that there's fallen nature of man. So we can't give all power to all people, one person can't have all the power. So they divided and separated the powers. This is an important clarity for me, and I think for a lot of people. And what it did for me is it helped me to be more generous in my looking at different people and realizing they're made in the image of God. I need to give them dignity. I need to show them respect. And that's what a civilization would be about, is to be civilized and to understand that we need to honor these rules. And I feel like we're in a dangerous place when we become more uncivil. And so we need to go back to seeing these two areas where we realize that we have a fallen nature, but yet we're created in the image of God and we have dignity.
And one thing I always emphasize to audiences is that we, the American people, are not each other's enemies. I call it WANE, W-A-N-E. We are not enemies. We have real enemies. And, my wife and I have been to 68 countries. We've lived overseas. And I'll tell you, there is no place like America. We are incredibly blessed. And you gentlemen have done us an enormous service with this movie. But I want to ask you this last question. What message do you hope young viewers will take away from The American Miracle?
The message of gratitude, the message of thankfulness. If you are fortunate enough to be born in the United States of America and to know our history, it's not one day a year, Thanksgiving. Every day should be Thanksgiving Day. And again, it's a key to personal and national happiness. And the gratitude is so profoundly important. And just part of what Tim was saying, there's a story that I love, and it may be apocryphal, but I don't think so, because a number of people have certified that it actually happened. There was a famous rabbi, his name was Kamenetsky, and he was flying at one point between the United States and Tel Aviv. And, he was seated next to a socialist leader from the new state of Israel. Israel had just been created. And he was traveling with his grandson, and his grandson brought him slippers. He came to see. The rabbi was sitting in first class. The grandson was not. And sitting next to him was this labor leader, socialist leader from Israel, from the Histadrut. And as they were flying, he said, I can't believe your grandson is so kind to you. He is so respectful. Look at the way he treats you. He says, my grandson, he wouldn't give me the time of day. What did you do? What's the difference? He says, very simple. For my grandson, he believes that I'm 2 steps closer to God Almighty, who created human beings. For your grandson, you're 2 steps closer to a monkey. and I think that idea of the importance of God's hand in our lives, in the life of our country, is one of those things that is desperately needed right now. And I hope that the American Miracle movie can play a small part in restoring that.
Beautiful.
Well, for me, I think that I have a responsibility to be a citizen. And I think that it also means that I have a responsibility not to forget God in the dialogue of our nation. Because the founders, I believe, I might even been John Adams, they said this system of government can't operate without understanding of God. And we are being somewhat deceived. We are being deceived if we think that that's the case, that we can go away from that, because so much of our dignity and our comes from understanding the fact that we're created in the image of God. So that's the reason why I think this film is important, is to give people encouragement that our understanding is something that we should not yield, and that we need to be encouraged and realize that our founders believe this. And we've been told, and Robert George says this, and I've talked to him about this, that we've been told some things that aren't true about the founders. But these people were men that they weren't all from the same denomination and same faith necessarily, but they were a mixture of different ways to look at God. But they did not separate themselves from God. So I believe that's the message that we need to remember now and not forget. Kind of like the story of the Exodus. It said, do not forget what God did by bringing you out of Egypt. And interestingly enough, the founders, even Benjamin Franklin, suggested that the image of America could have been the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. So there is a biblical connection here, and I think that's where we're at right now, not to forget God in our nation.
And even Thomas Jefferson, who was also looking at the design for the Great Seal of the United States, Franklin had suggested that they have a Great Seal that showed crossing the Red Sea. And Jefferson suggested they have a seal that showed the Hebrew people guided by a pillar of fire in the night and a pillar of light and in the day, a pillar of smoke in the day.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing what happened with this country. You know, when Alexis de Tocqueville came here in 1831, because the Europeans were so fascinated with how this country, barely 50 years old, was already competing with them. You know, he was duly impressed by our system of government checks and balances, by our educational system, by our business environment that encouraged entrepreneurship and innovation. But the thing that really blew him away were the churches and the sermons that gave the people a moral basis. And, you know, he concluded his 2-volume set, Democracy in America, by saying America is great because America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, she will cease to be great. And I think your movie emphasizes that. And it's things like this that I think will help to stimulate a revival in our country. You know, we don't have to be like everybody else. We're not like everybody else. We're different. And that's the reason that we rose to the pinnacle so quickly. And if we want to stay there, we need to embrace our history and not rewrite it. So thank you, gentlemen, so much for what you did. And where can people see the movie? How can they get it?
They go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com, AmericanMiracleMovie.com. They can put their zip code in and they can buy tickets, and they should buy tickets and invite as many people as you can. If you want, try to fill the theater in your area. And if you're don't see a theater there, let us know, because we can find a way for you to see this movie. There's other options that are coming.
Great.
And it is one of those things that I've been reviewing movies for a long time in my other life, 30 years. And this is a film that makes you feel good and grateful, and to appreciate that idea of America's both greatness and goodness. Not flawlessness, but goodness overwhelmingly.
Amen.
And again, another quote from Bismarck, which he says, "It is the job of every statesman to listen for God's footsteps in history and then to grab his coattails and hang on."
Fantastic.
And may we be blessed with that same insight and ability to hear God's footsteps and grab the coattails and hang on.
Thank you so much, both of you. God bless. We'll be back with my closing comment in 1 minute. We're so grateful for Michael Medved and Tim Mahoney and their creation of this beautiful film on the founding of this nation. It's very inspirational, whether you're a religious person or not. Recognizing the hand that God and faith has played in the creation of this nation is something that would do us all good. And knowing our history, we need to know all of our history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But the fact of the matter is, if you're objective, there's a heck of a lot more good than there is bad and ugly. It's not to say that there isn't some bad and ugly. There's bad and ugly any place that people exist. You know, why is it that people have to bother each other? They can be living perfectly fine, have everything they need, and they see somebody else and they have to go bother them. It seems to be our nature. But, you know, that is something that has been different about this country. When it reached the pinnacle of the world, it didn't try to dominate everybody else. And that says a lot about who we are as a nation. And I hope we will always remain that way as a nation and in our individual lives. And that's it for this week. Make sure you tell all your friends and neighbors about us, because we want to spread common sense. And subscribe for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't miss a single episode. You can go back and review all the many episodes when you have free time. It's much more entertaining than HBO, by the way. And remember the cornerstone principles: faith, liberty, community, and life. We'll see you next week.